Welcome back. Management consultancy IQ Business says the damage COVID-19 has wrought on businesses and people is almost irreparable. The organisation is investigating the impact of the virus on the economy now and in the future. We're joined by IQ Business's chief economist, Sifiso Skenjana. Thank you very much for your time. So in your report, you describe COVID-19 as a fatal blow to the South African economy. We did see some early reports in level 5 and 4 on the economic impact of the lockdown. But is the picture really still so bleak under level 3?
Hi, Anli, and I think we have to look at the whole picture, and we can't look at only at level 3 and see how that contextualizes itself to the economy. And so, if you remember, we had a whole month of stage 5 lockdown and a whole month of a stage 4 lockdown, and what we're expecting on a quarter-on-quarter GDP contraction of about 33.8%. Compared to the first quarter. And when you look at the whole year, you're expecting about 17.9% contraction in the economy. And that's quite sizable, if you just contextualize in terms of the impact that it can have in terms of unemployment and labor losses in the economy. And so, and there are a lot of businesses that have closed that won't open again. And so even when we look at what the theoretical level of the economic activity at each of the stage alert levels, I call it theoretical because there's some businesses that can't operate sustainably, even though when they're actually given the go-ahead to operate, just given some of the constraints that are available. Some of the restaurants, for example, will tell you that the nature of that restauranting doesn't lend itself to delivery, and therefore that restaurant must remain closed. And for example, in mining as well, when you say some of the miners must operate at 50%. South Africa, for most of our minerals, we're mining, below surface, which means we've sunk a shaft, and so you can't decommission 50% of a shaft, and therefore it becomes, unsustainable to operate at a level below 100%. And so some of those things certainly manifest in a really catastrophic way for the economy, and that certainly are the things that inform the numbers that we expect to come out of the economy.
So you spoke to about 707 businesses to formulate this report, and only 50% of those businesses asked said they would be able to keep their workforce stable. So talk to us about the estimated job losses that you foresee.
So that was a Stats SA report. We reference a lot of the other literature that's currently in the marketplace, as well as some of the literature from National Treasury. And then we contextualize that into our own assessment, into our own analysis. And, given the fact that, for example, you've got wholesale, which is a large employer in the economy, and within wholesale, you've got, of course, tourism, you've got catering, and these are sectors that at a stage 4, stage 5, stage 4, stage 3 are still unable to operate. It means that there's certainly going to be catastrophic losses there. And I think one of the interesting things is that also the labor profile in the sectors that are most exposed is largely the unskilled or semi-skilled labor, which makes it even more riskier for them that once they get laid off, it becomes increasingly difficult for them to come back into the labor force. We saw after the 2009 financial crisis that when jobs started to recover, earnings didn't recover as fast. And so this is some of the things that tends to happen once people leave the labor force. And so I think the impact that will have, given the fact that households attribute about 60% of GDP expenditure, or household expenditures attributable to 60% of GDP, it means that when those household losses come in through job losses, through reduced hours, and of course also through the fact that businesses aren't financially sustainable and therefore earnings are going to be depressed. A lot of people's salaries have been cut already. All of those things certainly point to a really depressing, I think, view of the South African economy. But I think that certainly mustn't paralyze us into not believing into possibilities of rebuilding the economy into a sustainable growth path.
Yes, I'm glad you're talking about rebuilding. It's always important to look ahead and to see those positives. Does your report make any suggestions or specific predictions for recovery?
No, absolutely. And so one of the things that we lament on, and I think now we're finding a lot more consensus around, is that it's not lives versus livelihoods, it's lives and livelihoods. And what that means is that we did put our foot on the health accelerator. It's now time to put our foot on the economic accelerator while keeping our foot on the health accelerator. And so what that means is that what are the sectors, for example, that were able to operate sustainably in a lockdown impacted economy? What does it mean for us to increase the kind of investment in those particular sectors? And so I'll make the example and say e-commerce. So how do we make e-commerce more inclusive? How do we make the small textile makers able to get into those supply chains that they wouldn't otherwise have? We've seen also a trend in a deglobalization in the context of the global economy, where we're insourcing a lot of our capacity. So medical goods now have to be made internally or in a domestic context, where previously only 60% of the global demand was attributable to 3 countries. Now there's manufacturing capacity that can come in locally around that, and those are some of the opportunities that we ought to leverage and really
and of course government very keenly saying that people should be buying local, making local, big focus on South African made and sold goods. Unfortunately, that is where we're going to have to leave it. Thank you very much, Sifiso Skenjana from IQ Business, speaking to us there about their recent report.